The next thing that we want to do this session is to talk about how to write that experiential learning essay. Since you'll be writing several for your class, and you have the opportunity to write, as we said, up to 10 of these for credit throughout the program. And just a quick review, we've talked about this a little bit already in this session, but the essay is built around the Kolb learning model, which means you're going to have 4 sections. The first section will have your concrete experience. In the second section, you'll write about your reflection. In the third section, you'll write about the abstract concepts that you learned from that experience. And then the fourth section, you'll write about how you could apply that learning in another setting. So everybody should have received this purple handout, Guidelines for Writing an Experiential Learning Essay. This has everything you need to know about what I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes so that you can keep this next to your computer when you're writing your essays at home over the next couple of weeks. You also received a sample essay that's on the green handout, and you can hold on to that, and when I'm done with the teaching portion, we'll do a workshop where you'll be working with this document in groups and just kind of analyzing it and learning more about how to write an essay. So hang on to those 2 things for a little bit later. Okay, and as I mentioned, your essay needs to be about your personal adult experience, and it should be comparable to a college level subject. So the first thing that you want to think about is choosing a college level subject for your paper. And as you think about that, it's easiest to kind of maybe make a list of life experience, work experience, and look at that list, and we'll be doing that a little later on in the workshop. Okay. Just to get you started, you have in your portfolio handbook 3 pages of possible essay topics. So if you get stuck at home, I don't have any life experience to write about, I really suggest that you look at those 3 pages and I think you'll find something. But here's some sample topics under psychology: alcoholism, pregnancy and childbirth, death and dying, divorce, stress management. Okay. So if you've had some experience with loss, maybe you've lost a family member and kind of walk through that an extended illness with them, then you might write about that or just check that as a possible topic for an essay. Or maybe you have some experience in business already, so you could write about things like advertising, sales, inventory control, human resources. Okay. So again, just make some checks by those possible topics. Okay. And during this phase, I'm trying to figure out what subject I'm going to write about. Be sure you're thinking too about what department, because as you write your essay, you're going to want to focus on business topics. So sometimes we have a student who writes an essay, maybe a business essay, but then they're putting in a concept that would be better suited in another setting, and I can't think of an example at the moment. But I bet you one will come to me later on. So, okay. Then the second thing you want to do after you've decided on your topic is to do a little bit of research about that topic. And this is a really important step, because if you don't do this research, you may discover later on that there are not enough references that fit your experience, or maybe the concepts that you've chosen are not written in the language of the department or the subject that you're writing about, and so it's difficult to write your section 3 and come up with those principles. So what you want to do is find some scholarly literature, some articles that you can use just to think about how you're going to frame your essay. So for example, if you've been managing a work team for 10 years and you decided to write about supervision, then you want to look at a management textbook or maybe some articles about management. Just see what's the kind of language that is being used in the field of business today to write about things that you have experience with. And this is important because the whole purpose of writing this essay is to demonstrate college level learning. So you really want to be sure that you're using the right language of the field. You also want to avoid using non-academic sources like websites or just magazines or newspapers or dictionaries. In Wikipedia is a great online reference for just kind of getting some idea of what concepts you might write about, but it shouldn't be a reference for your paper. And it's through this research process that you're going to come up with some possible ideas, some theories, some abstract concepts that fit your experience. And these will become the references for your section 3. So now you've chosen a college level subject, you've gone to literature and you've said, yes, there's plenty of literature on the subject, I'm in the right ballpark. I'm finding literature about my experiences and my ideas and the concepts I thought I'd write about. Or maybe you've gone to the research step and you've said, you know what, there's nothing on these topics. Maybe I need to think rethink how I'm phrasing my experience or framing my experience, or maybe I need to look at another experience. If you get stuck at that point, this is a great time to ask for help. So just shoot me an email and say, I'm stuck. Here's my experience. Here's what I thought I wanted to write about. I can't find any literature. And oftentimes, because we read hundreds of essays every year, I can say, think about it this way. Instead of saying this, say it this way, and try searching under these terms. And so a lot of times that's all it takes to head you towards the kind of information that you need. So where are you going to find some of these online resources? It really helps to look at online databases for professional journal articles. And you have a great resource here at APU because you have the library right next door. And online we have access to 17,000 journals and online references. So there's plenty of material available to you. And if you don't have a high-speed internet access point at home, you can easily come here and use the computer lab. And if you have any questions about that, I can point you in the right direction for that. But there are lots of ways. And later on in the workshop, we'll actually go online here in the classroom, and I'll show you how to find those journals and even net books. They're full books that you can use for that process. You can also review any college textbooks that you have here. You can check them out from the library, books by experts in the field. So if you're writing about business, you might want to look at something that Peter Drucker has written on management. Okay? And you can also consult our library staff. They love it when students ask for help. Okay. So you've chosen your subject, and you've done some research, gathered some references, and now you want to say, okay, what 3 things am I going to write about? For example, if you're writing about owning your own business, and maybe you've done that for 3 years, you only have 10 pages to write about that. And in that 10 pages, you have to tell us what you did, you have to tell us your reflections about it, you have to write 3 concepts, kind of like a mini research paper in the middle of this essay, and then you have to apply it somewhere. So there's not a lot of time to write about the whole of your experience. So we're asking you to look at just 3 things you learned. So every section of your essay should focus on these 3 things that you learned. Here's some examples of abstract concepts: mentoring, communication, delegation. Okay. These are all ideas that you can't picture in your head. There's not like a concrete object that comes to mind when you say these things. These are processes. They're actions that are taken sometimes by a manager. They can't just be described in 1 or 2 words. So they'll give you some depth of experience to write about if you choose these kinds of concepts. Now some of them can be quite large. You could actually write a whole essay on mentoring and choose 3 concepts that go into effective mentoring, or 3 concepts that make for effective communication, and go deep that way. Or you can keep them broad but just not be able to share as much on each topic. So some more examples: customer service, recruiting, employee assessment. And again, these could be abstract concepts that you write about in a general fashion, or you could write a whole essay about a topic and choose sub-concepts under those as well. So to identify abstract concepts, it helps, as I mentioned, to look at the textbooks, to look at maybe a course outline or a syllabus or a course description in a college catalog, or you can do a database search, and it'll usually list different subjects that fit with your topic. Here's some more titles. We looked at a few earlier. We've talked about small business, caring for children. It could be any kind of chronic illness. Classical vocal instruction, inventory control, news interviewing, or public speaking. Okay. So just really don't limit yourself, but kind of take a broad view of some of the things that you've done. And giving your essay a title can actually help you kind of focus your experience. So don't just say parenting. Say maybe parenting teenagers. Or don't just say interview techniques. Say the context for it and kind of give us a specific experience. It also helps to think about what are some titles that you might find in a college syllabus that can help you narrow down your subject as well. Okay. All right, let's go right ahead and talk about how to write the introduction in the first section. The introduction is going to kind of set up the context of your essay. And so if you would look at this handout, the green handout, you have an essay called Fundraising for a High School Theater Program. Your essay will look just like this. It'll have these titles. It should have 1-inch margins, double-spaced, a 12-point font at the biggest. So look at this introduction. It's only 3 to 5 sentences. You can see it starts, for the past 3 years, I have served as a theater production manager for a private high school. So it's written in the narrative voice. The person is telling you, I have done this. This is my experience. It introduces the subject, theater production. Later on, the author says, one of the responsibilities of this position is fundraising. I've learned that successful fundraising for a high school theater program is enhanced by cultivation of a donor base, partnerships with local businesses and organizations, and audience development. So in 3 or 5 sentences, this person has told you the context of their experience, the subject of their essay, and the 3 specific things that they're going to be writing about. Some students say this is the hardest part of the essay to write because it's so concise. It's almost an abstract for your whole paper. And that really is the purpose. So the reader already knows what to look for in each of your sections. Here's another sample introduction. From 1984 to 1990, I partnered with a friend to help her run her employment agency. We specialize in placing temporary employees in a variety of industries. 3 keys to our success were strong customer service, aggressive recruiting, and accurate employee skills assessment. Okay. Clear, concise, you know exactly what the 3 topics are going to be. Okay, any questions about that section? Then you're going to go ahead and just start right in on your section 1, concrete experience, where you describe what you did, how you did it, when you did it, where you did it, maybe who you did it with. Okay. You're basically giving us a narrative of your experience, but just your experience around those 3 concepts that you're writing about. This section's a narrative voice as well. You're a storyteller in this section, and it should be 2 to 2.5 pages. You're supposed to be really specific in this section about the nature of your experience, because it's your involvement with this experience that really gives you the credibility to earn college credit for your experience. The rest of the essay is going to discuss what you talk about in this section from different perspectives. So this is the part where you tell your story, you only tell it in this section, and you never tell it again. You just talk about it and reflect on it. Okay. Here's an example. Going back to that customer service essay with the temporary agency. This student writes, the first thing we did was establish guidelines for customer care. We agreed to follow up within 20 minutes of any telephone requests for employees. Even if we did not yet have a person to send to a company, we contacted the person making the request to let them know what the status of their order was and so on. So right off, the student is telling you what they did related to their first concept, which was customer service. And then you continue writing 2 to 3 paragraphs about that concept. And then when you're done with that, you start on your next concept and write 2 or 3 paragraphs about that. And then you write about your third concept and you're done with section 1. And then in section 2, which was called reflective observation, you're going to be describing and analyzing the effects of what you filtered through your concepts. Okay. So you're going to say, okay, I look back on this experience with customer service and marketing and this whole idea of running a temporary agency. And what did I observe as I look back about how I did that? Now, how do I compare this situation to other business situations that I've been in? Or what were there patterns or relationships that emerged from that experience? You don't want to keep talking about your experience. You're reflecting on it now. Again, this is narrative voice, and it should be 2 to 2.5 pages. So here's your opportunity to make comparisons, show patterns, contrast your learning. Just reflect on the learning in that section. So here's an example of a reflective observation section. And the student writes, I recognized very early in our business that good employees refer good people. One effective strategy we used to promote recruiting was giving a bonus for every referral. And then at the bottom she says, I came to realize that when we went the extra mile by recognizing these referrals, many more referrals came our way. Now, there are a lot of different ways. There's lots of different reflective language that you can use in this section. This is just one way to do it. But you're going to reflect on each of your concepts. And on this purple section that you have, we provided some prompts and some examples that can help you when you get to that point. Okay, then you're going to move on to section 3. And it's going to be a little bit different here because you've told your story and you've reflected on it kind of from a personal standpoint. You've kind of given it some meaning, some personal meaning. maybe some professional meaning. And now you're going to put on a different hat. You're going to become the professor. You're going to be the teacher, the instructor. It's almost as if you're now teaching a workshop on your 3 concepts, not on your experience, but on the 3 concepts that you've taken away from that experience. So you want to give us your in-depth knowledge, the principles, theories that you've learned from this experience. And you're also going to need to figure out what academic sources you're going to use, because in this section, and only in this section, you're required to use at least 3 outside references. Okay. So this is kind of giving us a theoretical framework for the learning you gain from your experience. So this section is written in the 3rd person, which means no longer am I going to want to see I language or we or you should do this. It'll be when running a small business of this type, a manager needs to consider this or these kinds of things. It's more general. Okay. And this section is 2 to 3 pages. It's kind of the heart of your essay. It's where you demonstrate your learning and understanding of the subject. Okay. So here's an example, a sample section from section 3. Small business owners, even more than their larger counterparts, need to understand who their customers are and give them excellent service. A customer is anyone who pays money to acquire an organization's products or services, and that's a quote from someone else, or a thought from another author, so she gives the author and the year. In an employment agency, customers are both clients and prospective employees who need placement. So you can see it's different. It's not about the personal experience, more about what was learned. And you don't see the word I at any point in that paragraph. Okay. Just a word about APA style. For this paper, you'll be using APA style, which means that when you're paraphrasing an author, you have the text that you're using to express their thought, and then you're going to have in paragraphs their last name and the year of publication. If you're taking a direct quote, so word for word from the article or book that you used, then you're going to have that quote in quotation marks, and then you're going to have the last name and the publication year, but you're also going to include the page number. Okay. That's general APA style.
Do we have this?
You have this information in the first module where you received is it Diana Hacker, a writer's reference? And you talked about style. There's actually a section in the back of that book, a whole tab just for APA style and one for MLA style. So just flip to the APA tab. There'll be examples and explanations of APA style there. There's also some differences between APA and MLA for your references page, and you can look more in depth at that in that guidebook that you already have. Look at section 3 in your sample essay, Abstract Conceptualization. And Rhonda's pointed out that this author does use I a few times. And so what I want to say about that is you can use I if you're given an example or of what your concept is. So this student has given her concept and done the explanation, used quotations, and then occasionally she'll give an example. She'll say, so here she says, in our case. So it's a little bit harder to do, and so I try to discourage you the first time around from doing it because sometimes students end up writing more about their experience. But you can, and this is in your instructions, you can occasionally refer back to your experience when writing this section. But I really suggest that when you're first writing it, you try to avoid that. And then if you read it over and say, here's how I'm going to say, yeah, I understand this, and here's how I used it, you can do that. Okay. But for the most part, it's probably easier if you avoid doing that. Any other questions on section 3? Yes?
Oh, I'm sorry, not on section 3, but in our paper, are we actually putting introduction to concrete experience?
Yes, in your paper, you will have the Kolb model subheadings. So you should have a section that says introduction and concrete experience and reflective observation, and then this section would be abstract conceptualization. Those headings help the reader to spot right away and know when you're changing because there's a different purpose to each section of your essay. So that helps us identify when you're switching topics. And it serves as a transition because you notice there aren't transitions like there are in most essays. You don't need a transition sentence or a transition paragraph because you have that heading. Okay. There is a website that you can use to look up style issues too, if that's easier for you. ABA style. If you put APA in Google, you'll get a zillion sites that can help you with APA style. Okay. And the reason we use APA is most of our essays that end up being evaluated are in the psychology area or the business area that use APA, whereas English and some of the literature would use MLA. But since most of our essays go the other direction, we're using APA style. Okay, section 4. All right. Active experimentation. What you want to do in this section is show us that you are able to transfer this learning to a no setting. It doesn't have to be something you've already done. It could be something you think, or a way that you think you could use the learning. You'll see later on when we take the sample essay apart that this student talked about how she could use her learning in different settings that she hasn't experienced yet. So you can do that, or you can say, you know, I used this experience with my home-based business when I went into the professional setting with a large corporation. So it can be either way. And you're basically just describing how you use it or how you might test it out. So you're going to take each of your concepts and do this. And it's easiest to do them in order. Say, I could use this in a classroom setting, and here's how I would do that. With this concept, it would look like this. With this concept, it would look like this. And with this concept, it would look this way. So each of your concepts, just share how you would use that learning. So now you're back to narrative voice. Okay, so you started out, I did this. As I think about that, here's what I see about it. Then you say, if the person using these concepts would use them this way in your third person, and now you're back to, I can use these concepts in this way. It should also be 2 to 2.5 pages long. Let's put an example. Okay, so this student wrote, one important place that I can use the concept of accurate assessment is when I help out in my third grader's classroom. My daughter's teacher has me test students for skills, and I've adapted some of the time methods I used in business to help me in her classroom. So this student is taking the business concept of assessment, maybe employee assessment, and applying it to a third grade classroom. Here's another example. Another way I use this idea is in my new job as a fundraiser. Accurately assessing a prospective donor's interest areas is key to securing a donation. So again, this concept of assessment, employee assessment, now used to assess a donor and their interest in giving, where they might be interested in giving. So make sure that you choose settings that are really different than the context that you shared in section 1. And make sure that you take this and apply it to all 3 concepts, not just 1 or 2. And it's not enough to just say, I use this in my classroom. You have to say how. So she's given examples of what she does. Okay. And then when you get to this point, you've done that with all 3, then you are basically done with your experiential learning essay. So once you get the essay written and you edit it and you make sure that you've got your reference page in order, if you want to submit it for credit, you'll just print a clean copy of that, because you're probably going to have a copy that you keep in your portfolio. So print out another copy or email a copy to me or Stephanie. And when you do that, you're going to need to attach a petition for academic credit. And so the easiest way is probably just to say, I have got an essay I want to send you. And I'll say, okay, great, here's the petition. Send it back with this form completed. And remember that essay processing can take a few weeks, so we don't want you to wait till the end of your program to do that. Okay. Any questions at this point? Yes? Good question. There is no conclusion required. When you're done with section 4, you're done with your essay, except for your references page. So some students choose in that last section to just write a concluding statement, but it's not required. And it could just be, or it could be just a concluding statement related to active experimentation, to that section where you're applying your concepts. Any other questions? Okay, what we're going to do with the rest of our time is to break into small groups and discuss different sections of the essay. I'm going to have you make some observations. And then after that, you're going to do some individual writing, or just writing of brainstorming on topics for your essays for this class. And then we're going to have a whole group discussion where you'll have the opportunity to give me some of your ideas. We'll put them up on the board, and we'll just kind of as a class help you tweak your concepts And the goal would be that everybody would go away from the workshop with some idea of what they're going to write about for next week.